Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you've been watching my channel, you know I've been wanting to redo this picture. This was the original photo that inspired me. After I drew my picture, I didn't want to have to redraw it, so I went ahead and traced my picture so that I could have it for future projects. And if you want, you're welcome to go ahead and do the same thing from this reference photo to follow along with this tutorial. I did want to make some changes to the sunflower though, and that is why I added in this sunflower. At the beginning of this tutorial, I just pulled out a bunch of random paints and paintbrushes. I will list below everything that I ended up using in this video. The watercolor paper that I used was ash cold press paper. Most of my projects I usually use what paint I have on my palette, but today I decided to use a clean palette. I have 2 jars of clean water as well. I pulled out a variety of brushes as well, but my favorite was the number 10 and the liner brush. The first thing I want to do is mix up my black that I want to use, and that will be the ultramarine blue, French ultramarine, and the burnt sienna. So I want to mix up my black, and I'm going to use probably my old paintbrush just to mix it up, and I want to mix in the right color. A little bit of the burnt sienna and some of the French ultramarine. You can squeeze the side of the tube to make that go back in so you don't make a mess. And I'm going to take my damp brush and pick up a little bit of the blue and a little bit of this one and just mix it to get a nice gray. And with my scrap paper, I just want to see what color I'm going to get. And that's the color I think I'll start with the eyes. Now I'm going to go ahead and rinse my brush out. It doesn't have to be thoroughly rinsed, but good enough. If there's a little bit of paint left in it, a slight amount of paint when you start putting water down on the eyes, then that will be okay. And I do like starting with the eyes because I think that's the focal point of any painting when you do your animals. Get that situated for you. Okay, and then I forgot to add the drawing gum. The drawing gum is going to be painted on where you want your highlight of the white in the eye. And with an old brush with a good point to it, and this I'll dampen it a little bit and get the point on it. And then we can pick up that drawing gum and dab it into the whites of the eye. We will need to do this on other places, but I'm just going to start with the eyes first and then we can apply to the highlights elsewhere on the picture. But right now I just want to start with the eye. It's okay if you get out of the area a little bit, because once you let this dry and when you're done with the eye and you go back and pull this off, then you can touch up around the highlight. So I'm just going to start right there for now. After using this brush, I washed it off really well, and then I dried it on a paper towel. This way I can have it for later and it doesn't get damaged from the glue. The other thing I failed to mention was I do have a small glass of water for the brush to rinse off the glue, because I don't want it mixed with my clean water. So that gives me 3 jars of water, which you don't need that much, but I just do that so I don't have to keep getting more water. While we wait for the drawing gum to dry, I want to mix up the color for the eyes. And what I want on this kitty cat is something like maybe a green, a dark green, light green, I'm not sure. So we're going to experiment with a few different colors to see what we like. So I'm going to go ahead and put this aside for right now and pull out my palette. And since I'm going to be using some of the sap green for the leaves later on, I'm going to use some of that in my palette. And I will also be using the cadmium yellow later in my leaves for the sunflower. So I'm going to just go ahead and use some of that. And then I will mix up the colors and see what I can come up with. Taking my damp mixing brush, I'll try the green first. Add just a touch of water. Maybe a little bit more of that dark green. I did get these paints off Amazon, and they're supposed to be Winsor & Newton, but I'm not so sure it is. I think they might be just a knockoff. And I think I like this green, so I'm going to go ahead with that. And if I want it darker later around the edges on the eye, I'll work with it a little bit. But I'm going to start with that. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse out this paintbrush really well, since that's going to be my wetting brush and mixing brush. Set that aside. Then we're going to check on our eyes to see if they are dry. Okay, it's pretty warm here, so I think the eyes are dry enough to work around. They're slightly tacky when you touch them on that drawing gum, but I think I can work around it with some light brush strokes. And with this, the foundation of this green for the eyes, I think I don't want to work with it a lot. I just want to lay it down on wet paper that I don't think I'll disturb it. But we'll see. And it's so hot here that I have to keep wetting my paint. It seems to want to just dry quickly. So now I got it so diluted, I'm just going to have to mix up a little bit more, see, to get the color I need. And since I already have enough paint and water, I'm just going to go ahead and go on dry paper over to the next eye, because I've got so much right here, and hopefully that will work out okay for me. You can see where I just had so much water. Now if you go over the line a little bit, we're going to be covering it with black later anyway, when we put in the black highlights, so it'll be okay, we can fix it. And I think I'll just let that dry. You can dry it with a hair dryer if you want, but I'm just going to let it sit and dry on its own. Since my paintbrush has still got paint in it and still damp, and I like this green to start with, so I'm going to go down here and while the eyes are drying, I'm going to put in some of that drawing gum and put it on some of these green leaves for the sunflower to keep some highlight in there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to get my paintbrush for the drawing gum and apply the highlights. Okay, taking our damp brush, we're going to add water to where the green leaves would be only. So I have to keep tabs of what my sunflower leaves would be. And this is good right here. So this is going to be a sunflower petal, petal, petal. So I just want to go in here, and I only want to do a few leaves at a time so it doesn't dry up on me. So I just keep control of where I'm going. And then take some of my green, and I don't mind if it's going to be pale. And I'm just using this watery brush because it's not going to matter when you put down the water. Even if it's got the light green in it, that's okay. It'll be fine. I think that's going to be a yellow petal. That's a petal, petal, petal. So I'm just going to go in here and follow that line under the petal. And since I watered this paint down, I can just go ahead and use what paint is there. It's going to be a petal, so it's kind of facing upward, so I'm going to leave that alone. I just want to keep my sunflower petals, so try to keep everything separate. Once I get my petals separated, I can have a big sigh of relief. Well, this is still a little damp. If you want, you can go back in and darken up some of the darker areas. And if this paintbrush is too big, you can definitely swap it out for something smaller, which I might do here in a minute. I think I'll let that dry and just see what I get. I might darken up more later, but it's always good to step back and just see what you get. Sometimes I don't do that and I get impatient and then I ruin it. So it's good to just let that dry. Okay, I think the green on the eyes is dry enough to go back and apply the black. So just with a damp brush, number 10, and a mix up or use the mixed up black or gray that I did. And on dry paper, I'm just going to go in and fill out the black. And why I like the gray when you start out is because when you come back with some pure black, then you can reserve some of the shading of the pupil, and it just brings out a lot of character. And then if this is, because this is probably still slightly damp out here on the edge, but it's going to bleed in just a little bit, so it's going to give like a little shade or highlight to that color. And if your paint's a little dry, you can just go back and just get like a drop of water. I mean a drop. And if it seems like it's too dry, you can always add another drop of water. And when you first touch the paint, you might want to go up toward the eyelid, because that's usually where the darkest part of the pupils are. And then that way it will take the pigment out of your brush. So then as you move down toward the center of the eye, that color will start to fade out into the gray. Okay, and then we can add water to lighten up this gray. And get it enough so that it's light. So you can go around the edge. This is the part where you need to hold your breath. But you just want to highlight the eye, because you're going to come back with flat black later and highlight it some more. But you're just barely touching this paint. And then I don't touch it no more because I want to dry it and reevaluate it. So I might move back down to the flower. Okay, back to the flower. So I noticed I forgot to do highlights on this side on the sunflower. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. And I'm just going to do this because I'm not sure where I want highlights, and I want to make sure they're there versus not being there. I think I might just smudge a little here. Not sure. I'm just going to see what that looks like later. So in the meantime, we're going to work on this side while that dries. Okay, so for the center of the sunflowers, I'm going to use the same black that I used up here for the eyes. And again, this is dried up because I did walk away for a few minutes because I did make a mistake by rinsing out my drawing gum in my good water. So I had to go change it. So this, we're going to mix up a little bit more of this because I'm running out. And I really kind of like it where it's going to be mild pigmentation because that will give me more of a highlight. And so I mix it this way. I know in the beginning I used a little bit of the blue and then a little bit of the burnt sienna, but I want this kind of watery so I can just float it over and see what I get. But I don't really want it dark, too dark. Now I'm going to go ahead and put down some water. I got that mixed up. And I'm going to apply some water on my old brush. And this is all dry now. This is kind of, well, tacky. And I'm just going to start with this first part. I had to look to make sure that I'm still recording. And I got a little bit of water here, extra water than what I needed. So I'm going to pull it out and bring it over here between my petals. You can just pick it up from that puddle right here if you get too much. And I'm kind of wanting hard edges because I do like the looks of them sometimes. And later on, if I don't like them, I will work on getting rid of them. But sometimes I really like them. And it adds so much character, so I just leave them. Okay, I'm going to add some water to the other one. Hopefully I don't get as much, but it actually looks all right. Trying to avoid my petals. And I'm just dabbing this on. I'm not even really touching the paper that much. The water's doing the work for me. Okay, while that dries, I'm going to go back to the eyes. When I do the eyes, I usually like to do the pan because I feel more comfortable with it and I have more control over it. Now you can definitely use straight out of the tube if you want. And I'm going to avoid that today because I want this to come out as good as I can get it. And I would rather practice that another day. So using your liner, actually I might use a bigger brush, but I'm not sure. I think since I want the eyes to be perfect, I think I'm gonna just continue using this one and go with that. And I usually spray my pan with a little spray bottle full of water. And this may be a little difficult today since it is about 100 degrees outside. And so with this kitty cat, I used the original photo from a friend's cat for the reference photo for the eyes. And I'm going to try to go with that. Once this picture's done though, you can use this one as reference, the completed picture. So hopefully if everything goes well, that can be used. Okay, so I got my paint ready and my little liner brush, and I'm going to just line this up a little bit with some water. The good thing about the liner brush, it doesn't carry a lot of water, so it's hard to make a mistake because you've got more control over the water and the paint. So I'm going to start on the inside of the eye is where it's darker. So I'm going to go ahead with that. Sometimes I get too much water, but by the times I get it to where I need it, it's evaporated and it'll work out okay. And when you get a lot of paint on your brush, you can add some water and try to spread it. I like to go as slow as possible with water, even if I have to, I mean the paint on the eyes, even if I have to keep layering it. I just don't want to make a lot of mistakes. So if you have a fear of making a mistake, the best thing to do is go real slow and layer it. Layer the paint if you have to. But I also like to highlight more on the top or in where the shadows are going to be when you first put your paintbrush down on the paper. And I like to highlight more around where the drawing gum is. And you're just dabbing the paint into the water, like little drops at a time with this little liner brush. Now we're going to let this eye dry and we're going to move on to this one, and we're just going to go ahead and do the same process that we did for the first eye. As you can see, I started doing the lining around the eye, so we're going to do that with both sides and try to round them out a little bit. Okay, with a damp brush, you can take out some of this black. So with just a damp brush with a little bit of water, you can just push this black out. So it just gives a little bit of gray. And you can just go around the eyes and get them the way you want them. So we'll work on that a little bit. Sometimes I like to even this out. The black here might be needing to be darker down on the edge. So we'll work on that just a little bit more. I want to try to highlight around the eyes a little bit more with some dark green. So I'm just going to take some dark green with a little bit of that black on my brush and see if I can highlight around that. And add a little water. I'm going to leave the eyes alone right now, and I'm going to go to the nose and start working on that. So I'm going to go back to the French Ultramarine and the burnt sienna and do my little mix with the blue and the gray, or make it into the gray from the blue and burnt sienna. And I'm going to do this on wet paper. So I'm going to go ahead and take my water brush and apply the paint, not the paint, the water, sorry. And I just want to put down some of that gray. And I might drop in just a little violet here. Yeah, that's cute. Okay. And that's just off my, this was not expected, so this is just off my pan. And then I'll let that dry. So I'm going to work on the flower. So I think I'm going to make my own orange. So I'm going to use the crimson hue that I have here. And I'm going to use some of the cadmium yellow that I had. And I'm going to do some fresh samples here. And just work with the colors. This is all experimental. I just start with the yellow first. Let's see. I might just go with a diluted yellow and lay that as my foundation. Okay, I'm going to lay down the water first. I did a diluted yellow here, added a little out of here and put it in here for the diluted yellow. And we'll see how this goes. I don't know, a little nervous, but we're going to put down some water and add the color. Just going to start with one petal at a time. And I'm not sure if I want soft edges or just hard edges on this. And starting down here at the bottom, because I want the darker color to be at the bottom, and just work it upward. I'm just adding a touch of the orange. I apologize if the sunflower was out of view, but as you can see, I'm just kind of going with laying down the water, but sometimes I just put down the brush, even though it has some paint still left in it, and continue with what I'm doing without laying water first. And I moved this picture so you could see it a little bit better, and I really apologize about that. But I'm just kind of trying to get it laid down, and then I will go back and put more over it as I need to, as I see that it needs more color or something else. And hopefully I won't cause any watercolor blooms, but that's okay if I do, because I am not successful at them, and I really like them in my paintings, but I never can produce them when I want to, only when I don't want to. So if I get them, that would be great. So I had some equipment failure in recording the rest of the sunflower, and I apologize for that. So I might have to put this video in 2 parts. So what I will do is work on maybe the sunflower and then do a second part on finishing up the cat. On the sunflower, I'm going to darken up some of the green leaves and add in some darker green to just give this more definition. I will be working with a damp brush and on dry paper. Now we're going to move up to the nose and finish off the nose, and I'm going to use the Ultramarine or French Ultramarine and the burnt sienna mix and put in the nostrils. Before I get any further on the cat, I'm going to use my drawing gum and put in some highlights. As I mentioned before, I do not have the equipment to do long tutorials. So this is going to be the stopping point for this video. The second part of this tutorial is going to be focused on the cat, and I hope I gave a good foundation to finish up the sunflower, because behind the scenes I'm gonna just finish up the sunflower by taking off the drawing gum and putting in some more highlights, and you can hopefully see what I did in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your support, and I will see you next time.